Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review the new National Geographic documentary, Fauci. And this focuses on Anthony Fauci, the doctor who obviously has become a big fixture in our society because of the coronavirus and during this COVID pandemic. And this documentary focuses on a couple of different times in his life in particular, especially obviously everything that's been happening during this pandemic, but also cutting back to his work with the AIDS pandemic and also when SARS and Ebola first popped up here in America and being on the forefront of that. It also paints his personal life and him as a human being. And I guess that's a place to start because this film focuses on, it has one of his daughters on here. It gives a little perspective on Anthony Fauci as a human being. And it's interesting because this is a man who works a lot. And it does show he wasn't always there. He wasn't always focusing his most energy on the actual raising of his children. And one thing that I could appreciate about this documentary from John Hoffman and Tobias is that it isn't just some focus on making sure this man looks like $1 million coming out of this. Obviously, I think this film in general has a more favorable look at him, but it's not afraid to shy away from not afraid to shy away from that perfect image that some people have put up of Dr. Fauci with the bobbleheads and the t-shirts and the socks and all these things. There's flaws here, and the film will focus on them. It shows a little bit of that when it comes to his family. Not a whole lot. It doesn't really dig too deeply into that. There's also some experts on here who call him out on his mistakes, like the inconsistent mask mandates during the pandemic. And he tries to justify himself in the film, but it's you have these critics pointing out these things, and it isn't just critics from Fox News who obviously have a completely different kind of agenda. These are actual peers and experts who point out these particular things that caused issues and could have been handled differently. And it's interesting because it gives some perspective on his place in trying to fight the AIDS pandemic back in the 80s. And this film uses nonlinear storytelling, cutting back and forth, trying to highlight some of the, experiences and the similarities between that and COVID. And I think the film does an alright job in terms of bouncing back and forth between those things and trying to paint that picture and bringing to light that he did a lot during the 80s fighting against AIDS, but also there's this perspective part of the problem. And they show him being the one who worked with this Ebola patient, being the one who helped get them cured and being there to hug them afterwards and showing overcoming that big piece of fear. And the film, shows him who he is, interviews him, and you get a sense of how he really is as a person. There's moments where he gets emotional. There's moments where he's very matter-of-fact about things. And you show this older footage and you get to see how he's grown as a person over time. And it's interesting, and obviously this film is a thing because how much of a fixture he has become in our society because of COVID, but it also highlights the importance of these scientists who have these experiences that are trying to bring these perspectives into these big, dramatic, and drastic situations that are affecting human society. And I think this documentary is interesting. I don't think this is a groundbreaking documentary. And on some level, a lot of this is these are things that we know because it's we see this. He's such a big public figure at this point. Obviously, it depends on what you're looking at and the perspective that's painted over this. But I feel like this film does a fine job. Not like the greatest job, but like a fine job of having some objectivity here and just trying to be like, this is who this man is, this is the impact he's making, and this is how he's been involved in this scene for decades. And I appreciate that about this, and on some level it does like hit close to home, because like some of these things are really fresh. Some of these things I feel like it's like, did these really need to be explained this deeply? But like, I guess it depends on who you are, what your perspective is, and where you've been getting your media perspective, because obviously that's a big influence on how you're probably viewing Dr. Fauci. Because you might be chanting, "Fire Fauci," or you could be like chanting "Saint Fauci" and "Thank you Fauci." It's just like, or you could just be like a normal person and realize like this guy is just a expert. He has his perspective, he has what he needs to do, and he's doing his best to try to help during all of this. And, you know, just a human being. And that's what this film's able to paint, is the fact that this is a human being. He has his flaws, he has made his mistakes, but this is what he brings to the table in terms of his perspective on things. And I think that's interesting, and this film does a fine job of portraying that. But those are my thoughts on Fauci. Let me know what you think. Let's talk some movies. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.